Somewhere in the Calixis sector of Segmentum Obscurus lie the three united forge worlds known as the Lathe Worlds. It is composed of 3 planets, orbiting a single star on different planes, yet its influence extends across the entire region, and this influence is not always positive. Previously, we have acquainted ourselves with the Lathe Worlds, which have become the heart of Calixis's tech priesthood. Today, we shall speak of the enigmatic places and secret outposts that are hidden within the Lathe World system, or have ventured far beyond its boundaries into Calixis space. A multitude of anomalies and other unsolved mysteries of the galaxy have caught the attention of the priests of the Omnissiah in the Calixis sector. And shortly after 3 Lather-class ships landed on the surface of the 3 worlds, the explorator fleets began to study the system. Factories, orbital facilities and research stations proliferated among the stars, utilizing the opportunities presented by anomalous zones. This was truly an unprecedented event in the history of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and thus entire explorator contingents were dispatched from Mars to be at their disposal. The task was simple: to fully develop the potential of the 3 ancient fabricator ships. The 3 belts encircling the system were of different origins, and thus each presented particular interest. Furthermore, they were positioned at strange angles to the plane of the ecliptic, and at their intersections they formed zones of unstable turbulence. Researchers from Mars and beyond were eager to come to the system to pursue lines of inquiry as varied as gravimancy, cryomantic mining, and kinetic discordance. Distant areas of space were simply filled with research stations, weapon platforms, and agrodome, so the region could exist almost autonomously and withstand a long siege. Many of these regions became ideal data repositories and centers for the study of captured ships, exotic Xenos barges, spacefaring wanderers of various origins, and much more that was delivered to the Forge worlds for countless other reasons. By fate, or by whoever distorts its paths, we have acquired information about the most mysterious objects of the Lathe World system and their associated objects in the Calixis space, and I am pleased to share it. Centanim is the birthplace of something greater than the Forges themselves. Shrouded in mystery, it is capable of shielding the grandiose projects and ambitious plans of its adepts from prying eyes solely through the inexplicable disturbances of the fabric of space and time observed within its bounds. Even if an agent manages to penetrate the outer perimeter of the system's defenses, gravity itself will rise against him. Numerous unpredictable local anomalies will make traversing the system without knowledge of local charts virtually impossible. Gravitational storms and tidal forces, overcrowded system transport routes from planet to planet, countless debris and space junk accumulated over thousands of years of colonization, all form an almost insurmountable labyrinth for any uninvited guest. The most diverse celestial bodies of the turning system revolve around a star capable of both granting life and taking it away. As you have already guessed, it is called Centanim, and is the burning heart of the star system. It generously supplies energy to countless solar generators and agridomes, but within it something seems to be stirring, generating powerful energy eruptions that wash the system with waves of deadly radiation. Some magos believe that microscopic whirlpools of singularity periodically arise in the star's core, while others think these waves are the result of gravitational storms ravaging the rest of the system. To prevent such a destructive manifestation of this luminary, it has been surrounded by research stations through which the tech priests attempt to predict and mitigate the effect of the next eruption. The insatiable star has already consumed more than one station whose adepts dared to approach too closely in search of answers. Desideratum. Above the turbulent sea of its temperamental star hangs the scorched sphere of Desideratum, whose wastelands have become the primary testing ground for macro-class weapons. In the orbit of this world lie several stations and platforms which serve merely as mounts for weapon systems. Others, such as the Sagittarian platforms, are equipped with truly fantastic weapons, each being the offspring of disparate data fragments, the legacy of a distant past that excites the minds of historians and military scientists across the galaxy. They are armed with enormous variable caliber cannons, whose adamantium and ceramite barrel plates can move from place to place, granting these weapons the ability to fire any conceivable ammunition. The most inclined towards pure science adept would call such weapons unfathomable. The surface of Desideratum has absorbed so many shells, warheads and energy beams that its original structure remains only a matter of conjecture. The planet has been ravaged beyond recognition, and its depths harbour so many unexploded ordnances and failed volatile experiments that the fabricator of the Lather Worlds has simply forbidden the loyal servants of the Omnissiah from landing on its surface. Chela, the earliest cartographic atlases make no mention of this small planet, but now doubting its existence would be inappropriate. For 1,500 years, Chela has served the Magos as a reliable and safe repository for artifacts, experiment results, or samples too dangerous or too incomprehensible to be contained under standard conditions. The surface of the planet, if it indeed exists, is concealed beneath multiple levels of storage facilities, warehouses, and gigantic infostacks. Automated systems programmed to kill without warning stand sentinel even over warehouses whose contents are but dust compared to the true treasures of the Chela. The deep corridors of the Chela, shrouded in a venerable carpet of untouched dust, lead to the greatest wonders and nightmares of more than 2 millennia of research and discoveries. Within hidden vaults lie mysterious Xenos devices, forbidden weapons of the arch-enemy, and remnants lost to the darkness of the past. A vast scriptorium holds all the information necessary to retrieve any item from the vault, but it is only accessible to those initiated into the highest secret of the Omnissiah. However, the greatest treasure of the Chela is contained within colossal stasis vaults almost at the very heart of the planet. There, like flies in amber, suspended outside the flow of time, hang the mangled wreckage of spacecraft from 6 alien races, as well as countless vessels recovered from the forces of the renegades. Lycosidai, huge chunks of bare rock floating in space, now serve as silent reminders of a planet destroyed by some unknown cataclysm thousands of years ago. Orbiting around this cosmic-scale tomb, a dead barren moon continues its predestined cosmic journey, unaware of the death of its celestial companion. This is Lycosidai, a fortress world, a bastion of the Omnissiah, the stark and unforgiving home of the Legio Venator within the Lathe system and the armory of the Lathes. Lycosidai was granted to the Titans in the first 2 centuries of the dominance of the Adeptus Mechanicus over the system of Lathe worlds, but over time it has been transformed into an impregnable citadel, the last line of defense, tasked with holding back the enemy that has managed to overthrow all other lines of the Lathe defense. However, the primary task of the Titans and the Skitarii of the Legion is merely to withstand the first assault of the enemy, for within the fortress walls lies the most devastating weapon humanity has ever possessed. This weapon has not seen the light of day since the times of the heresy, and will remain silent until a battle erupts that threatens the entire Calixis. Rusica Mandate Stations. The network of agrologic domes and sorting stations stretches across the entire system, supplying food to the inhabitants who still require it. As a meticulously designed project, the nodes of these agrarian platforms make the Lathe world system entirely self-sufficient. All stations are located near bustling transport arteries, connecting all inhabited dominions of the system. Each station is carefully guarded, for any disruption in the food supply could result in the death of millions within weeks. Anchorage of Preclusio. Within the star system Centanim, there are regions with relatively stable gravity where sudden outbursts of gravitational anomalies and magnetic waves from micro-singularity tides do not manifest. Here, tech priests can work with fragile massive cargo, and it's here that a secret scientific station has found haven, while wrecked void ships await restoration crews. These are the Preclusio anchorages, providing safe and secured sites for the most intricate projects, as well as for the most dangerous artifacts and experimental subjects. Among the treasures stored here are the remains of an ancient orc transporter, a practically untouched space drifter once teeming with gin stealers and a mysterious shimmering ship which no one has managed to board. The crowning jewel of this collection is the wreckage of a gigantic Eldari craft world. These artifacts have been brought here over centuries in the hope that magos who dedicated their lives to studying them could extract any information hidden within the silent hulls. The Asteroids Belt. One of the most intriguing features of the Lathe system is three mutually intersecting asteroid belts. They orbit in inexplicable paths around Centanim and from afar resemble the rings of a giant gyroscope. It is believed that each belt contains the remains of planets destroyed long ago, which fell victim to deadly gravitational waves or some anomaly, as abundant in the system. The composition of each belt is unique. The immense stones of the Etiam Iod belt are as dark as the surrounding cosmos. They are composed of obsidian gleaming with a dark, oily sheen in memory of a lost world blacker than night. The Lapis Nun belt consists of lumps of fine-grained clay shale laced with crystals of promethium ice. It's unstable and extremely volatile, meaning the frequent explosive anomalies occurring in this belt are a fantastic spectacle. Finally, in the Krinet Resh belt, one can encounter planetoids entirely composed of multifaceted crystals of bizarre shapes, priceless attributes for various practices of psychers and mystics of the Calixis sector. The points where all three belts intersect have been named the Tradular Zones. There, tons of rocks and precious minerals shift chaotically and destructively. Despite numerous navigational challenges and the unstable nature of the zones themselves, many adepts deploy their monitoring platforms close to the borders of the Tradular Zones, hoping to unravel the mysteries of the system's distant past and its unusual gravitational anomalies. However, the process of studying the Tradular Zone raises more questions than answers, as these points feature constantly changing gravitational activity, and the presence of research stations carries the highest risk. When directly questioned by subsector authorities about the methods of conducting research, the Magos prefer to remain silent, which raises suspicions about Lathe worlds possessing technologies unknown to the Imperium. Excipio stations, the public face of the Lathes. These are the stations most often open to outsiders. The main staff work at cargo sorting points and docking berths for large freight vessels. However, there are decks for trade shops, industrial enterprises and other structures that serve as cogs in the system of economic and political interaction of the Magos with the entire Calixis. Each Excipio station is gravitationally stabilized to facilitate navigation and convenience for non-augmented humans, and so-called artificial factoriums are often found here, producing the simplest and most mundane goods. Their purpose is to satisfy the curiosity of Imperial citizens wishing to view an operating forge temple from the inside. Besides bureaucrats of various ranks, one can encounter the lathe pilots here. These are specialists endowed with special augmetics that help navigate the void within the star system. They are knowledgeable about virtually every particle of dust floating in space and informed about the effects of any anomaly and ways to circumvent it. Such specialists exist on every world of the Lathe system, and indeed in any holding of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Diogenes 4. For a tech priest there is no greater goal than the pursuit of knowledge. It is this that drives the explorator fleets into the unknown in search of ancient technologies, fragments of STC, lost forge worlds, and other relics from the times when humanity was ruled by science. They venture into unknown space to disappear without a trace for hundreds of years, others never to return. Diogenes 4 is one such station, a tiny speck illuminated by the blinding and deadly glow of pulsars. There are now hundreds of these stations, their simple and reliable construction serving as an ideal platform for conducting a wide variety of scientific experiments. Its angular hull is entirely covered with docking ports, sensor spires, and filled with equipment necessary for ongoing research aboard. This particular station was deployed in a region of relatively stable space near the centrifugal boundary of the sector. The nearest neighbours of the station became pulsars, each worthy of close study in its own right. Needless to say, an entire cluster presents an irresistible temptation for the inquisitive researcher. And although this region is relatively stable, The stations balance atop a very precarious gravitational hill. Even the slightest disturbance in balance can inevitably lead to a fall into the heart of one of the local stars. This significantly complicates any physical contact with the station and makes it practically unreachable. Most often, visitors reach the station by generously scattering the void around it with the wreckage of their own ships. Some tech priests among the denizens of Diogenes IV are convinced that navigation is significantly hampered by the influence of a number of previously unaccounted objects. They claim that telemetry of these objects is impossible due to the pulsar's radiation clogging all ranges, as well as the unknown properties of the objects themselves, rendering them invisible even to the station's most powerful sensor equipment. Whether this theory holds true or not, it brings some clarity to the history of a number of terrifying shipwrecks near Diogenes IV. Occasionally, gravitational confluences become so strong that reaching the station becomes impossible. Absolutely impossible. And any guests who have overstayed at the station are forced to remain in the port until the anomalous activity subsides. Sometimes crews caught in the storm wait it out aboard their own ships, but in most cases the vessels are not equipped with adequate protection against the whims of this destructive phenomenon, forcing soldiers, officers and passengers to seek refuge within the station's walls. Diogenes itself is not best suited to such conditions either. During storms, its compartments are barely illuminated, and the invisible technical hatches and dangling wiring throughout prompt extremely careful movement around the station. Diogenes IV does not offer many special comforts either, and those that do exist are primarily designed for the tech priest. For these and some other reasons, there are almost no outsiders on the station and almost no inspections conducted by higher authorities. Moreover, to avoid embarrassing the Calixis governance in front of even higher-ranking representatives of the Imperium, the existence of this station is scarcely mentioned anywhere. Nonetheless, those who come here to conduct private research find this status quo more than satisfactory. Diogenes IV has been isolated for many centuries, washed by gravitational storms and other perils of the cluster. Elderly tech priests busily bustle around the station, tuning their devices for data collection and conducting esoteric experiments whose essence is incomprehensible even to other members of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Thousands of cogitator servitors connect into an extensive network, their impersonal brains' computational power constantly engaged in the processes of receiving and processing vast data arrays from hundreds of sensor vanes that practically stud the station's hull. Hundreds more wander the corridors, dutifully carrying out the mysterious tasks of their masters. Most of the station lies in impenetrable darkness, and its corridors are generously strewn with various debris and fragments of shattered lumen globes. In some compartments, not a single living soul has appeared for years. These chambers lie in complete disrepair and oblivion. Few care about restoring the abandoned halls, and traces of research always hold precedence here. Yet it is precisely in these dark sectors that the most dangerous experiments occur. Countless decades of isolation have taught the inhabitants here to neglect safety protocols and other annoying obstacles on their path to the goal, where success promises far more than any of its consequences. A mind arriving at such convictions steps far beyond what can be called madness. And it is in such conditions that dissent flourishes, bordering on tech heresy. Magos of one of the secret sects are convinced that local pulsars cause extreme thinning of the veil between worlds, and intend to find a way to synchronize their pulsations to create a massive warp rift. They intend to adapt it for travel even without warp drives. The fact that through these gates, hordes of demons would immediately surge forth does not concern them in the slightest. Fortunately for now, all their efforts directed at constructing working interstellar oscillators have not borne the desired fruit. Others believe that if the magnetic fields of the pulsars are correctly aligned, it will be possible to open a passage to another section of star space, thereby simulating the interstellar travel methods some Xenos use. That is, they are attempting to create a fragment of the Aeldari webway. Followers of the Lost Talon have dedicated their lives to studying a mysterious relic, whose age dates back to times long before the founding of the sector, and which seemingly resonates with the radiation of the pulsars, and possibly even governs their frequencies. Groups of rogue etheric magos are constantly disturbing the warp with their horrifying experiments. One tiny sect has even gone so far as to revere the pulsars as messengers of the Omnissiah, and now seeks ways to awaken their power through several charges of inverse matter. And these are far from all the semi-mad ideas of secret societies that have found refuge here. Diogenes IV harbours within its walls many such beliefs. Vile offspring of the alliance of darkness solitude with the darkness of thoughts and deeds in the name of the Omnissiah. And with the passage of years, it becomes clear that sooner or later something mad will erupt from this cluster of space, and this something will become a trial for the entire Calixis sector, or even for the entire Imperium. Lacuna. Members of the Adeptus Mechanicus within the Calixis sector maintain whispered accounts of a hidden planet amid the domains of the Lathe worlds. It is not listed in any official registry, and no star atlas contains its coordinates. Those who know of it prefer to remain silent under the threat of death, and only in the most secret and influential societies of the Lathe worlds does this planet gain the name Lacuna. Once Inquisitor Voyitz of the Ordo Hereticus arrived there. Shortly before his sudden death, he discovered a series of later modifications in the data files of the heretic rebel Gelfolum Vosnik, which Voyitz decided were intended to conceal the fact of the existence of a certain ship, or perhaps a planet. The recovered fragments of his final transmission allow us to understand that he did indeed find this black planet, nearly merging with the inky darkness of space. However, the unexpected and sudden destruction of his ship prevented Voyitz from transmitting a more complete report. The astropaths who happened to receive his last message were soon found dead. They were killed in their own cells with an autopen to the heart. The only more or less logical explanation for what happened lies in the nightmarish warning, a fragment of which was recovered from his data files. It was addressed to Voyitz, or perhaps to anyone who dares to set foot on the surface of this planet. The warning sounded as follows: "Everything will be as if you never existed, and only the darkness will mourn your death." Nevertheless, we managed to obtain a few pieces of information from sources that wish to remain anonymous. Lacuna is a small, airless world, the precise location of which remains zealously guarded by the sector. The entire surface of the planet is covered by a layer of pitch-black substance known as lacuna dust. This dust is completely inert to the effects of electromagnetic waves of the visible spectrum, which, among other things, means that the cloak of darkness is not only impenetrable but eternal. The astonishing properties of the surface, combined with the negligible thickness of its atmosphere, make Lacuna virtually unrecognizable against the backdrop of cosmic blackness, especially in the dim light of the system's sun. Rumors and speculations concerning this planet are numerous and varied, and the answer from the Lathe Covenant to any statements of such nature is always the same. No planets matching the description exist within the holdings of the Adeptus Mechanicus of the Calixis sector. Nonetheless, from time to time, tiny batches of lacuna dust surface on the black markets of the sector, each time sparking a new surge of talk about this mysterious planet. The only industrial enterprise on Lacuna is the Obsidian Forge. The duty of its ruling fabricator, bearing the title Obscurus, is to ensure that all necessary litanies and services are performed in full accordance with his commands. Within the walls of this isolated complex are sparsely lit workshops and laboratories, populated by tech priests whose mouths and minds are bound by logical seals and hypnotic oaths, and whose hands are incessantly occupied with sifting through and unsealing devices, the mere sight of which would render any viewer awestruck with sacred tremor. Thanks to ciphers embedded in the synoptic cogitators, many of the inhabitants of this forge are simply incapable of realizing what exactly they are engaged in at any given moment. At the heart of the complex, behind rows of automated turrets and cohorts armed with skitari, rise the colossal bronze doors. Each leaf is reinforced with adamantium, adorned with sacred carvings, and interlaced with intricate internal circuitry. Beyond such a formidable passage lies an entire labyrinth of vaults and halls, within whose walls relics and artifacts and the lacuna are stored. Every sector of this convoluted labyrinth is under the control of a deadly security apparatus, ceaselessly roaming the dark corridors, always ready to annihilate anyone not marked with the fabricator's own permission. Rumours abound that behind the impregnable walls of the Obsidian Forge lie unimaginable treasures, from unknown STCs to specimens of technology dating back to the times when humanity's first stars lay at its feet. The Obsidian Forge is a place where the Skitarii and other armed forces of the Lacuna maintain their silent vigil, awaiting anyone who dares to pierce the darkness surrounding the Black Citadel. The most formidable of their weapons are the deadly Vigiles servitors. These machines specialize in the destruction of mechanical foes and constitute the first and finest line of defense, the Lacuna. Nonetheless, rumors persist that the Fabricator Obscurus possesses other weapons, capable of annihilating legions with a single shot and downing ships right from orbit. Whether those rumors hold truth or not, no one will answer. But even a hint that there is a single specimen of the legendary Ordinatus platforms makes the planet a coveted target for anyone desiring to gain power and might. The Obsidian Forge is not the only structure on this dark planet. The secrecy of the Lacuna, coupled with its gloomy days and impenetrable nights, draws magos like a magnet, those convinced their work is too important or too risky to attract unnecessary attention. And now autonomous research stations and secret complexes are scattered across the surface of this dark planet. Their exact number is carefully hidden from all but the Fabricator Obscurus. Any such information is deemed top secret. Typically, only those with significant influence and power in the Lathe worlds have a chance to learn of the Lacuna's existence. Not to mention, setting foot on its surface directly requires permission in the form of a document called Cellatus Arcanus. It states that as long as no signs of techno-heresy or planetary-scale threats are detected, its holder is permitted to conduct their research on the Lacuna under a veil of absolute secrecy. One who holds such a permit is wise enough to keep the document itself secret, a source of inevitable strife and conflict. Even on the Lacuna itself, the names of those possessing these documents are known only to the Fabricator. Moreover, the record of each document is transferred to data parchment and filed in a special folio. This imposing tome is chained to a special servitor whose sole task is the care of this sacred burden. The sophisticated biogenetic locks of the folio are designed to respond only to the bearer of unique structural genetic fragments, credentials exclusive to the Fabricator Obscurus. Any attempt at unauthorized access automatically triggers the self-destruction protocol through subdermal circuits integrated into each page of the manuscript. The Fabricator himself is inseparable from another book. Its pages are concealed from prying eyes by black shutters, locked by magnetic seals and auto-cyclic seals that have been thrice anointed with blessed oils following rituals of encoding. It is said that this book contains physical copies of STC and other treasured secrets of the Lacuna. It is truly a holy scripture, and its safekeeping is among the greatest responsibilities of the Fabricator. Due to the lack of direct control, it is unknown which complexes of the Lacuna remain active, what research is conducted there, or whether any inhabitants are alive. Some structures have, over time, changed hands multiple times. The planet is no stranger to the shadow wars of Cloak and Dagger, waged by feuding magos for possession of enigmatic relics and the results of secret experiments. The Fabricator Obscurus casts extreme disapproval upon such deeds. He continuously surveys his domains with a satellite monitoring system and a network of ultraviolet pictcasters. Any display of hostile or ambiguous actions is met with harsh, decisive, and effective measures. Nevertheless, only a few magos dare to make direct accusations against their foes. Such actions would inevitably reveal their own secrets. This situation has led to the emergence of the Act of Illumination, a strategy of gathering evidence against one's opponents, where the timing of its presentation plays a crucial role. The Fabricator Obscurus values this strategy above all and considers it a splendid tool by which to eliminate the unworthy and reinforce his power. Whoever manages to pierce through the veil of danger and intrigue will be honored to experience all the planet's bounties, with no restrictions on supplies from any of the Lathe worlds. The fabricator reviews the communique of each request and endorses the code of its origin with his personal seal. These actions ensure that the prompt processing of such requests benefits the Adeptus Mechanicus. Test subjects, forbidden items, Xenos individuals, rare energy sources of incredible complexity and purity, and raw materials sufficient to construct and properly outfit a frigate. And from all this wealth, the ordinary tech priest is separated only by a short psalm, blessed personally by the fabricator Obscurus. Most often, the true danger to the lacuna does not come from petty squabbles, but from what is hidden within its own depths. Many members of the Adeptus Mechanicus, whose views can quite rightly be considered dangerously radical, would gladly resort to deceit, bribery, and even murder if it grants them access to this planet, for the secluded complexes and unlimited resources are ideally suited for their profane investigations. These devious individuals pose the greatest threat to the realm of Fabricator Obscurus, and his forces relentlessly monitor signs of their activities. Among the mysterious inhabitants of Lacuna, numerous rumors and legends circulate. One of them tells of a rag-clad Magos, a ghost, and presumably a warp-spawned entity that prowls under the eternal night of this world. Legends say he was once a recognized tech priest who went missing in a disaster that completely destroyed his laboratory and all the fruits of his experiments. It is said he experimented with the warp. Whatever the goals behind these experiments were, at some point everything went entirely contrary to how it was intended, or precisely as intended. Whatever transpired significantly altered the reckless Magos. Now he appears as a ghostly figure shrouded in a soot-stained, tattered robe, whose mechadendrites and augmentations look severely damaged and burned. Trapped between the physical and immaterial worlds, the Magos can freely exist in either, but cannot linger long in either. In the physical reality, he appears only for very brief moments, with intervals between his manifestations stretching into tens or even hundreds of years. Whether this spectre has reasons to remain on Lacuna or not is unknown. Heterodyne. For most of the population of the Calixis sector, the image of a planet under Adeptus Mechanicus control immediately conjures up an industrial, smoke-choked and polluted landscape, in short, a typical Forge world, and most lathe system worlds undoubtedly fall under this template. Any new world coming under Adeptus Mechanicus control will inevitably become a new Forge, a living symbol of the opus machina on a planetary scale. Only a few planets are destined for a different fate, and Uziel is one of them. The Magos have only slightly touched this world and, having taken their seats at the Heterodyne station, they began to observe as the local population is transformed from expendable resources into valuable assets in the service of Lather Covenant. There are few authoritative reports as to when Uziel was originally settled. Most believe it was long ago, in the heady days after the Angevin Crusade completed its holy work and birthed the Calixis sector. Early reports describe it as a barren world, lacking in any notable resources. Its location did not provide any particular strategic value. Nevertheless, the environment and climatic conditions were considered quite. Soon the transport vessel carrying colonists set a course for an uninhabited world, and the people were prepared to settle it, turning it into yet another beacon in the name of the God Emperor, another light in the darkness that was, until recently, truly impenetrable. That light was extinguished. In the sector there were hundreds of other far more important worlds, and no one bothered to find out what had happened to this one. The warp storms that ravaged this region of space would also not have facilitated attempts to reclaim the planet. Years turned into centuries, and Uziel became just another failed colony, scattered records of which were buried in dusty data crypts. By mere chance, another 100 years or so later, the rogue trader Yad Osperu rediscovered this world, narrowly avoiding a crash upon exiting the Immaterium. The long years of isolation had turned the surviving colonists into savages who gathered in groups for protection from beasts. They had virtually no functioning technology left, and those devices that still worked were revered as sacred relics rather than useful mechanisms. Most of the population worked for the ruling elite, who were mutually bound by a series of feudal obligations that integrated almost all the inhabitants into a kind of defensive network. From the history of oral traditions, it became clear that a generation ago the colony was torn apart by a religious schism, and their ensuing civil war destroyed their civilization. The areas where defensive structures remained intact thrived, and soon those who controlled them became the rulers of the lands under their protection. The largest fortification, named Heterodyne de facto, became the center of a new civilization. The rogue trader did not profit from Uziel itself, but the news of his discovery brought him enough resources to completely refit his ship. The Ministorum was already preparing to once again bring the Emperor's light to this world when it suddenly became clear that another organization had been playing its own game all this time, and there was no hope of beating them. A senior factor of the Lathes presented the final proclamation, arrived at through a series of adroit political schemes and trades, the details of which have never been revealed. The Lathes took ownership over the world, a most unusual action given the lack of any clear use to the Mechanicum. External observers could not fathom the interest of the Lathes trinity in this world, as no ores, minerals, or even deposits of archaeotech were discovered there. Even more surprisingly, the incursion organized by the Adeptus Mechanicus proved not to be as extensive as their usual overwhelming presence. Instead, the arrival of the new lords of the planet was accompanied by phenomena remarkable for the sector: peace and tranquility. The colossal ships landed, but at a considerable distance from the castles and fortresses. The emissaries, using their wondrous technologies and concealed augmentics, blended with the local populace, soon occupying positions as trusted advisors to the local aristocracy. Barons and other leaders quickly appreciated the advantages of such cooperation and its invaluable benefit for strengthening their own power. Slowly but surely the seeds found fertile ground. A society already built on submission learned to revere all things mechanical while retaining its primitive way of life. Year by year, preparations were made for the flock to embrace the arrival of the tech priests and the introduction of ever more astonishing technological devices. People bore witness to new marvels. Enormous beasts dwelling in the hills were captured and turned into docile domestic animals, their fury suppressed by chemical implants and their bodies enhanced with mechanical limbs. New tools made of light, gleaming metal elevated the art of stoneworking to unprecedented heights. Fields that could barely feed a single family could now sustain many. Archers marveled at newly long-ranging bows and arrows. The number of tech priests continued to grow over time, reaching a point where they walked openly in the streets of local cities. No longer were they grotesque monstrosities to the people. They beheld them as avatars of an unknown god, revealing its divine essence to mortals through each new technological miracle. Yet despite such rapid progress, little fundamentally changed over the centuries. Fields are still tilled and ploughed, although the beasts dragging the plough may very well have cybernetic wheels instead of legs, and the hands sowing the tilled fields are at times made of metal. Knights continue to relentlessly hone their combat skills, yet they wield inertia lances, and beneath the skin of their mighty steeds roll strands of synthetic muscle. The castles still tower over the lands around them, bristling with mortars, yet now they are adorned with icons of the Deus Mechanicus. Vigilant sentinels patrol the walls and bustle about the cannons just as before, but now servitors are among their ranks, and the cannons fire plasma. Tech barons now surveil their domains through augmentic eyes, and the loyalty of their subjects is ensured with homeostasis brands and implants. The planet thrives, not losing its original essence, which is quite atypical for one of the worlds of the Omnissiah's servants. Its population grows, and it has even become an exporter of food to nearby forge worlds. It is a shining example of the boon faith in the machine god can bestow upon a world. In any case, all affairs and aspirations of the planet are managed from a single center, the Heterodyne station. Ceramite lies hidden beneath the carved stone walls. Behind sliding panels are concealed macro batteries of las cannons, capable of countering both aerial and ground threats. The spacious courtyard is covered with meticulously camouflaged launch pads for deploying speeders and orbital skiffs. Not every tech priest is permitted entry through the gates of this fortress, and those who are allowed pass only after an exhaustive verification of their allegiance to the cult of the Mechanicus. The artillery crews and guards are entirely comprised of servitors produced within the dungeon-like depths of the fortress, which extend downward for many kilometers. Beneath the vaults of the cathedral-like laboratories lies the true nature of the tech priests' presence on Uziel. Only the tech priests are allowed there. They craft new technological gifts, always ensuring they are straightforward for comprehension. They prepare and augment preachers who carry the word of the Omnissiah to the faithful, equipping them with everything necessary. Vast enclosures serve as repositories for captured beasts, duly prepared for cybernetic surgery and transformation into far more useful biological resources. Here, those who have sinned against the machine god are turned into servitors. Those who dared to turn their gaze and thoughts to the forbidden are also here, but they face a far more unenviable fate. The reasons why the Lathe Worlds decided to conduct this unique operation remain unclear. It is quite possible that this was precisely how it was planned from the start. Certainly, this type of implementation requires far more energy and time than standard Forge World deployment procedures. For over 100 years, the tech priests have been guiding Uziel's population towards a civilized society, united in faith to the Omnissiah and ready to fight and die in his name. It is quite possible that there are other worlds transformed similarly, but then either none of them survived the process, or their existence is carefully concealed. On Uziel, the Mechanicus indoctrinates people into the nuances of proper technology worship, and very few representatives of the Lathe Covenant prefer this approach to standard cultural assimilation. Deprived of technology in the past, the people of Uziel now venerate it, and know how to appropriately glorify the Omnissiah, the giver of all blessings. Hostile tech priests consider this entire planet a new techno-heresy, for without proper understanding, proper worship is impossible. This does not prevent the inhabitants of Heterodyne from slowly but inexorably introducing the locales to ever newer technologies. Such procedures are also employed on other worlds, but their methods such as planet-wide brainwashing or the colonization of worlds with artificially grown humans are used. It is always more convenient to deal with those who are not burdened by homespun delusions or not bound by any entrenched belief system. Nevertheless, Uziel thrives, feeding its inhabitants and those of nearby worlds. His soldiers fight against the enemies of the machine god across the entire sector, and the activities of the cult Mechanicus on Uziel occasionally yield their scientific fruits. The ultimate result of the experiment on Uziel will only become known after many generations, but the tech priests of Heterodyne are patient and know how to wait. Morio. Far beyond the Lathe Worlds, shrouded in the shimmering veil of the ghost stars, lies a tiny system. Its heart is the most ordinary dim red dwarf, barely able to fend off the cosmic darkness. Orbiting it is a barren rocky speck, whose name, Capulus, has been preserved perhaps only in the oldest stellar atlases. The planet itself is unpretentious and completely unpromising in terms of both valuable resources and colonization. This cosmic lump of frozen dirt, almost devoid of water, almost devoid of atmosphere, is unlikely to attract the attention of those who crave wealth and power. Even the planet's lone moon at first glance offers no more than the planet itself. However, the moon's orbit is unusual. It always remains on Capulus's dark side, and not a single ray of light from the system's dim sun has ever touched its icy surface. It seems as if it hides behind Capulus, afraid to step into the light and reveal the secrets entrusted to it. Nevertheless, this state of affairs suits the masters of the Lathe Worlds perfectly, for on this tiny moon stories and rumors have dubbed it the name Morio. The Mechanicus bury their most terrible secrets. There is no noteworthy atmosphere above Morio's dusty plains, and its surface climate is, for the most part, scarcely different from the icy vacuum of the void. The side of the moon turned away from Capulus is pockmarked with the traces of ancient cataclysms, collisions with asteroids and other cosmic debris. There are no signs of life there, neither past nor present, neither human nor any other. But the other side of Morio, the one facing Capulus, is covered with the lights and spires of a grandiose hive city. larger in size than practically any hive in the subsector. Majestic towers and cathedral factories of the machine god rise above Morio's surface and extend deep beneath it, reaching even to its cold, silent core. All this is the tomb of the Adeptus Mechanicus Calixis sector. When any of the followers of the Omnissiah of the Calixis sector reach the end of their life path, their remains are transferred to Morio with all possible care. Ancient sarcophagus ships carrying their precious cargo traverse the treacherous warp routes between the dominions of the Lather worlds and Morio. Once they arrive, a multitude of system cargo ships deliver the bodies of the fallen to the surface of the moon. Although servitors perform most of the heavy work, there are also adepts whose duty is to prepare the fallen brothers for burial and perform the last rites to the machine god over them. The duty of these humble brethren, known as mortifiers, is not limited to consecrating their co-religionists to eternal rest. For this is not merely a tomb world for the followers of the Omnissiah in the Calixis sector, but also a place where the Mechanicus extract cybernetics from the dead to renew them and bestow them upon a new generation of tech priests. The crypt is the next step not only for the remains of the followers of the Omnissiah. Here, where their flesh is processed into corpse starch, an essential part of the religious canon of the Adeptus Mechanicus, lies the main repair workshop for all recovered bionics and cybernetics that are yet to serve members of the cult of the machine. The creation and maintenance of cybernetics in a working state demands enormous expenditure of time and resources, a task that becomes progressively more challenging with each passing year, as too many bearers of knowledge of these wondrous devices perish before passing it on to subsequent generations of tech priests. Restoring cybernetics and implanting restored samples to those seeking the Omnissiah's blessing allows the mortifiers to save priceless resources as well as gain equally invaluable experience. Moreover, the entire process serves a sacred purpose. It is the foundation of continuity among members of the Adeptus Mechanicus, far more reliable and enduring than the memory of even the oldest of magos. A worthy tech priest might someday receive the mechadendrites of the most renowned Logis of the system, or gaze upon the world through the same bionic eye that once belonged to one of the creators of Calixis. But there is another reason why the Mechanicus conceal their crypt. Knowledge is power, and it is here that knowledge, which magnifies the strength of the cult Mechanicus, is preserved from oblivion, for on Morio the memories of the fallen are safeguarded. In the deepest dungeons of the crypt, the mortifiers and their servitors tirelessly perform their grand labor. They keep ancient cogitators and data retrieval devices operational, which are perhaps the most complex and delicate machines in the Calixis sector. Here, mortifiers connect the cortical implants and cybernetic synaptic circuits of fallen brethren to a giant system called the Cenotaph of Calixis. Then a series of incomprehensible technomystical processes is initiated, during which accumulated knowledge and experience of the now-deceased tech priests are extracted from the connected devices so they may be accessed in the future. To date, the ability to extract and utilize this information is, at best, in its nascent state. But recent experiments with sacred machines, deemed heretical by some, have indicated a certain breakthrough in this direction. Dark rumors circulate from mouth to mouth about how the Mechanicus might wield this colossal repository of the greatest scholars of the sector. Mortifers recount tales to one another of rare Xenos caught at the Cenotaph. These are typically imprisoned in one of the underground dungeons, from which no one has ever escaped, for nothing must hinder the progress of this great work. When it is complete, its results will be revealed to the sector so that all may understand its greatness, which every true tech priest already considers indisputable. Ryboth System. The Ryboth system is relatively small, with only 3 planets orbiting its dim yellow sun, the scorched rock Ryboth and the gas giant MKZH-12, on whose low orbit is situated the gas extraction station Tranthos Gamma. And although Ryboth is no longer the industrial giant it once was, it cannot be said that its system lacks intriguing details. When the Great Storm hit, Ryboth's many orbital docks and geosynchronous defense platforms were caught completely unprepared. Following the failure of overloaded void shields, numerous local equipment failures quickly merged into a total and catastrophic system collapse. Thus, station by station, the densely populated orbit transformed into a debris-laden graveyard, lethally dangerous to any vessel daring to attempt a landing. Worse yet, the countless large debris and abundance of smaller rubbish make Reboth's orbit an ideal refuge for pirates, marauders and other rabble wishing to profit from the fool's ship that dared to enter this most perilous region without a heavily armed escort. On the day of the cataclysm, a small fleet patrol of the Adeptus Mechanicus was passing through Reboth. At the moment they were warming up the warp engines before the next short jump, the deadly gamma waves of the Great Storm struck the patrol squadron directly. The ships disappeared without a trace into the warp. However, a series of rumors about strange visions and inexplicable occurrences lead many to believe that the ships and crew members have indeed not perished. From the time of the disaster until the arrival of the explorator fleets, there was no news from the mining station Tranthos Gamma, although it seemingly suffered no harm. Its crew was never discovered. Gas extraction continued, though now the gas is enriched and purified on distant forge worlds, and the servants of the complex must cope with extended periods of isolation. Numerous accounts of fatal misfortune, deranged extractors, mysterious disappearances, endless accidents and other even more ominous incidents keep those responsible for order at the manufactorums from boredom. Despite the sinister reports, the station remains an active and quite important possession of the Lathe Worlds. As for Reboth itself, it too holds its own history. Magos Legarius Hirschtolt, who held the position of General Fabricator of this world, was well aware of the high likelihood of that catastrophe from numerous reports, thanks to the observations of his Lex Mechanic and Logic Seers. Unfortunately, the same reports and prophecies confidently asserted that the planet would not experience any adverse effects from this spectacular event. Hirschtolt even decreed a grand logical prayer in honor of the Omnissiah, but instead of passing by, a powerful wave of intense radiation struck directly at Reboth. Everyone on the planet's surface at that time perished immediately as the deadly cosmic wind stripped Reboth's protective atmosphere, swiftly rendering the entire planetary surface radioactive. The manufactorums managed to provide their inhabitants with some degree of protection, thanks to their massive size and certain structural features. Nevertheless, they were unable to accommodate all those seeking shelter within their vaults. The people turned into desperate refugees, striving only to find refuge and thus escape from the apocalypse devouring their planet. The mortality rate was extremely high, reaching 100% in some areas. The planet was saved from total annihilation only by the thick veil of volatile industrial waste from the titanic enterprises of the Adeptus Mechanicus enveloping it. Upon discovering the loss of contact with the thriving Forge world, the Lathe Covenant set out to determine its fate and immediately dispatched an expedition to Reboth. When the explorators arrived on site, they found only life-threatening radiation levels and a dense orbital curtain of debris from the cosmos-wrecked industrial facilities. The leader of the expedition, Magos Explorator Toborias, eventually decided that the most efficient course of action was to wait and observe until conditions stabilized before beginning any reclamation efforts. After 200 years of isolation, surface radiation began to decline, and the expedition members finally dared to land. Once there, they discovered a world dotted with mummified remains of those who, in their time, failed or did not manage to reach the now destroyed inner sanctums of the Forge. It seemed as if no one had survived this global radioactive cleansing. However, the inhabitants of Reboth proved far more resilient than anyone expected. Some were simply lucky, others adapted quickly. In any case, a certain percentage of the planet's inhabitants did survive the catastrophe. Those who took refuge beneath the planet's lifeless surface even managed to restore a semblance of civilization from the scattered fragments of their former culture. The explorators simply named them Rusteks. During the isolation, these hardy people continued to honor the Omnissiah and unwaveringly awaited the day they would once again conquer their world and lay it at the foot of the throne of wisdom and the machine god. Most of them continued to uphold the tradition of disregarding the biological origin of their bodies. Virtually each of them was augmented to some degree. To survive through the long centuries of isolation, the survivors were forced to utilize everything that came to hand. Fortunately, it was possible to surface on the planet at night, while moving and sheltering beneath it during the day, within the vast and labyrinthine system of transit tunnels, underground halls, and passages. These tunnels quickly turned into a grim and perilous domain, habitat to strange, unknown beings and wild creatures that swiftly adapted to hunt unwary refugees. Many of Ryboth's tunnels were expansive enough to house heavy transport trains and multi-ton levitation vehicles. All these structures remained relatively intact and became the dominion of colossal and terrifying monsters. In some places, durable ecosystems and climate zones formed, their characteristics directly correlated with the type of forge that had been located above before the catastrophe, as well as with several factors that emerged after it. Many tech priests survived the apocalypse and even retained their power and influence over the planet's remnants. Some even seek ways to restore the former splendor of Ryboth by skillfully combining peaceful work and military force, while others are inclined to believe that the planet's revival is impossible, deeming any endeavor toward this goal a futile waste of time. The most characteristic occupation for those subscribing to this viewpoint is combing the wastelands in search of any possible relics and archaeotech artifacts. Unfortunately, among the inhabitants, there are those who believe that Ryboth is not a place for peaceful coexistence. They readily resort to robbery and murder for valuable resources and treasures acquired by others. Furthermore, lone tech priests, prone to the most ruthless methods of extracting remaining technologies, have increasingly sought the planet of late, naturally disregarding the needs and aspirations of the local population. Such ventures are not without danger, but the reward sometimes justifies any risk. The two most renowned Magos of Ryboth among the survivors are Magos Veserimus, a former master of the MFS 1249 foundry and keeper of 6 of the 27 rites of initiation, and Magos Gresix, the Lord of 1,000 Voices. These Magos have managed to seize and maintain power over the ruins of the Forge world, and both wield enormous influence stretching across their devastated planet. Magos Veserimus has directed his efforts toward uniting the scattered survivors across Ryboth under the aegis of Mars's rightful authority. He is a staunch adherent to the ideas of Magos Fidelis and considers the destruction of Ryboth as irrefutable proof that the Lathe worlds long strayed from their true path. He has garnered many followers, and his augmented armies are one of the key factors on the path to restoring the fallen world. Veserimus succeeded in reconstructing part of his former factory, and it now once again churns out weaponry under his cold and calculated leadership. Compared to Veserimus, the aspirations and ambitions of Magos Gresix are far less lofty. The fate of Ryboth does not concern him. His domain, located in the deep dungeons of the enormous manufactorums of Forge World Secundus, is unique in that it exclusively employs the labor of servitors. The few Rustecs who dwell under the ruins of this hive are extremely reluctant to make contact with outsiders and generally avoid communication altogether. No one has ever seen Magos Gresix himself, as he prefers to speak through his servitors, and the echo of his orders is carried by the vox of thousands of mechanical slaves. No one knows exactly what Gresix occupies himself with in his dark lair. However, one thing is clear: he does not trust anyone whose mind is not under his control. Whatever he might be contemplating, those fortunate enough to live in close proximity to his dominions live in constant fear, for they dread that sooner or later they will be forced to become unwitting participants in his schemes. As for Hirschtolt, there have been no news of him since the disaster. Just before the Great Storm incinerated the planet, Forge Primoris switched to an automatic preservation mode, activating its internal defense system, which immediately and methodically set about exterminating all those unfortunate enough to be inside. Since then, no one has succeeded in breaching the defensive perimeters of the Forge to learn about the fate of the Fabricator. The Lathe Covenant cannot appoint a new Fabricator simply because there is no proof that the old Fabricator is either dead or has been proven guilty of heresy. The procedure for his replacement will require many years of debate and thoughtful analysis of the tree of all possible alternatives. Currently, the idea of penetrating Forge Primoris obsesses Magos Explorator Tiborius. Rumour has it that he pays handsomely for any information regarding its design and security protocols. Sheol 17. In a far-flung asteroid belt orbiting a lonely star with no name resides the infamous prison complex known as Sheol 17. A ferrous mass encompasses this foreboding black spire, which uses a network of massive support struts and enormous fasteners to anchor its great bulk. A tangled maze of pipes and cables swathes the entire structure and evokes images of a great spider nest in the boughs of a gnarled black tree. Within this ominous web, hanging like bulbous egg sacs in the void, are clusters of confinement units, any of which houses up to 1,000 recidivists and malefactors. From across the Calixis sector and beyond, they come, each a special prisoner of the Lathes, condemned for crimes against the machine god, each with secrets that the Lathes demand be revealed. For them, there is no simple execution or servitude. They must face Sheol 17 instead. It is rumoured that in the deepest dungeons of Sheol 17 lie cells of purgation, where psycho-heretics are held. Their cells are equipped with technologies of forgotten epochs and are said to resonate with the screams and wailing of securely imprisoned souls. Scattered accounts of these devices tell of unexplained power fluctuations, invisible forces hurling objects about, and sudden visions of death, destruction, and madness. Yet perhaps the most eerie of all these tales are those that recount the painfully pale glow emanating from the cells and the fleeting impressions of faces captured in unspeakable agony, swiftly disappearing from their smooth metallic surfaces. As soon as a captive arrives, the tech priests of Sheol 17 strip from them all bionics unnecessary for sustaining life and place them in the expurgation bays. There they remain, in an artificially induced chemical coma, while the defences of their minds and the interfaces of their cogitators are flooded with continuous streams of prayers in honour of the Omnissiah and condemnations of sinners who dared defy his doctrines. Periodically, the systems of the expurgation bays interrupt this restless oblivion to extract any knowledge, both accursed and useful, from the prisoners. For this purpose, each cell is equipped with an explication array. This device is capable of inflicting torturous pain upon the helpless captives, instilling a sense of extreme discomfort and despair, while the automatic life support systems vigilantly ensure the prisoner does not find solace in the embrace of death. Archivids, spindle-shaped constructs resembling the arachnids of ancient terror, tirelessly perform routine maintenance operations on these grim devices. Tiny servitors meticulously and intricately record every spoken word, the slightest deviation in biological or cybernetic responses, and synaptic fluctuations, immediately logging them onto data parchments, endless streams extruding from their distended abdomens. The explication arrays are also capable of interfacing with any implanted cogitator systems and memory coils, ruthlessly stripping every bit of cognitive data from the subject's augmented cortex. Data factorizers, code scrubbers, and other harvesting protocols thoroughly examine all in-loaded data for virulent scrap code, corrupt memory files, and other detrimental information. If any security protocols and subroutines within the heretic's mind try to resist, logic cants, cipher shunts, and cognitive fractors relentlessly disassemble them until no pre-programmed resistance remains. This process of forcefully retrieving data from an augmented brain is absolutely excruciating to the condemned, but the Archivids are unable to respond to such factors, only to record the data acquired. Subjects who prove particularly resistant to the blessed mechanisms within the expurgation bays disappear into the spire itself, where they fall beneath the ministrations of the Magos Interrogus and his excruciator servitors. These macabre tech priests excel at peeling away lies and extracting the truth from the most unwilling of subjects. Meanwhile, the excruciator servitors continuously monitor the vital biological and synaptic functions of the unfortunate specimen, while applying even more agonizing tools, chemicals and inducements to his unyielding flesh. Together, these servants of the Omnissiah exploit every nerve, synapse, circuit and servo within their victim's body to the greatest possible effect, bringing the accused to the very limits of sanity and sentience. When the archivids obtain a preset amount of data, they convey it to the vault of censure at the deepest point beneath the spire, for partitioning, analysis, and archiving. This agonizing process continues until every last byte of incriminating data from the condemned resides in the vault. Once certainty is achieved, the cleansing pits receive the prisoners and grant them their absolution, final death or life as a servitor. Sheol 17 hosts diligent coteries of tech priests who continuously toil to create servitors for a myriad of functions. Endlessly they prod and cut, graft and splice, commonly using the condemned as unwilling test subjects for novel or more efficient servitor patterns. Such things constitute the final experiences of the heretics on Sheol 17. Before their brain ceases to register such trivialities as conscious thought, and Sheol's rune of a cog within a cog is branded into their flesh, while the ranks of arachnoid archivids and specialized excruciator servitors claim many recidivists on Sheol 17, a select few serve their penance as one of the infamous murder servitors, who seek nothing more than to rend the flesh of their victims and drag the shredded corpses back to their masters. The overseer of Sheol 17, Archmagos Aractis Hasrix, is a shadowy figure within the Lathe world's hierarchy. For centuries, the reclusive keeper of this prison has dwelt within his spire, jealously guarding his position and the secrets of his inner sanctum. The archivids throughout the facility are said to mirror his own unique modifications, the most prominent of which are the mechadendrites which sprout from his back and torso. These powerful cybernetics resemble the legs of some great insect and are easily capable of conveying the Archmagos throughout his domain. Hasrix is a very influential figure in Lathe world politics, with strong contacts in both the Lathe Covenant and the Lord's Dragon. Some suspect that his reach may even extend into the ranks of the Calixian Conclave itself, and rumours of the dreaded black ships hanging suspended in geostationary orbit near the spire are common. Whether or not Archmagos Hasrix stands to gain from these clandestine transactions remains to be seen. The overseer of Sheol 17 continues his position and status, and any allegations that he takes too personal an interest in his mysterious vault, or inquiries concerning his other questionable pursuits, have remained unproved. Any good leader understands that when a crisis arises, it is morale that can sway the outcome of a battle. Even a tech priest comprehends that for those who are weak of flesh, morale is as crucial as equipment or combat stratagems. The cult Mechanicus primarily relies on technology and the melody of new hymns in honor of the Omnissiah. Among the Magos, not all are entirely devoid of emotion, and even the most mechanized of fabricators can appreciate the purely mathematical harmony of instrument and voice merged in song. Therefore, to bolster the morale of the people, the Magos have created a mobile choir that occasionally visits each of the worlds. It is named Voca Consensio. This is both a ship and an enormous musical instrument, designed for oratorios for a choir and orchestra of 150 servitors, of which 100 are instruments and remaining 50 are singers with cybernetically enhanced voices. These servants of the Omnissiah were modified and calibrated to become the finest performers. The larynx and vocal cords of the vocal servitors were removed and replaced with the finest cybernetics, while the musculature of the lips, tongue and palate were perfected with artificially grown tissues. Their gilded skin softly gleams, anointed with the finest metallic oils, and the silky waterfalls of long artificial hair sway heavily in rhythm to the song. Through cortical implants, the memory of these servitors is programmed with over 100,000 musical pieces, imperial marches, hymns, litanies, and more. Various specially crafted instruments are built into the bodies of the instrumentalists, and the bodies themselves are supplemented with manipulative mechadendrites and cybernetic respiratory systems, allowing them to perform with truly mathematical precision. Flocks of cherubs dance in the air during the performances, and their acoustically active bodies and wings move to maximize every available harmonic. The surrounding walls are decorated with endless rows of statues and ornaments, from mythical gargoyles to icons of the Angevin Crusade, echoing infrasonically at pivotal moments of the performance. The electric flames of arc candelabras and hovering luminators pulsate and quiver in time, with the poetic rhythm intensifying the effect of the songs with the play of light. Even when enveloped in silence, this cathedral dedicated to music presents a truly magnificent sight. It is hard to believe that the cult Mechanicus could even conceive of it, let alone manifest it. Even those who believe unaugmented spectators are incapable of grasping the true depth of the performance acknowledge that this masterpiece by the masters of Mechanicus is pure perfection. Voca Consensio was once part of a large explorator fleet dispatched to seek suitable locations for founding new forge worlds. The Magos have found a very promising application for this ancient vessel. To keep this astonishing gift of the Omnissiah in perfect condition, a substantial cadre of engineers and logisticians reside aboard. Their task is not only to keep the ship afloat, but also to ensure that the celebrated melodic performances are always carried out with maximum efficiency. Only a few know that the purpose of these performances extends far beyond mere morale boosting. The process of simply tuning the musical servitors is already a non-trivial task. But there are stories upon hearing which one could conclude that there is something more behind the concerts of the Voca Consensio. No, the concept of subconscious programming is by no means new. Its main features are clearly observable in any of the magnificent concerts. The stories suggest otherwise. According to them, the aim of Voca Consensio's performances is not to glorify the Emperor, but to make humanity submissive servants of the cult Mechanicus. Rumors speak of deep, subharmonic data streams woven into the fabric of blissful chorales, algorithmic inducements tied to certain melodic iterations, and even hypno-gestures hidden in the rhythmic movements of performing servitors, turning the choir and orchestra into instruments of converting humanity into slaves of the machine god. There is, of course, no evidence of this, but many carefully watch both the ship and its captain, the once disgraced but now prominent tech priest known as Lexil Cantus. Magos Cantus hails from Ladahet, and his career was initially associated with research in cybernetic augmentations and programming. However, his rise was interrupted in the most scandalous manner. Persistent rumors claimed that he was using forbidden Xenos technologies in his work. Whether these rumors were true or fiction remains unknown, but they quickly led to Cantus's exile. He was nearly branded a heretic, but certain connections within the Lathe Covenant allowed him to avoid that fate. He barely managed to secure passage on the first ship leaving the system. It was a rickety, barely functioning vessel capable of leaving orbit. But persistence is one thing Cantus never lacked. In 5 years, Magos not only completely restored Voca Consensio to its original state, but also improved its onboard Auspex systems, increased the efficiency of its engine plasma conduits, and carried out a series of other experimental modifications, some verging on blasphemy. It is said that while Cantus was toying with the astropathic Imagosnerium, the fabricator experienced an epiphany. He conceived the idea that the combination of properly harmonized voices could reveal to the sector a sign of the true light of the Omnissiah, while also facilitating some more pragmatic endeavors. Thus the disgraced tech priest was once again summoned to service. Currently, Cantus leads an entire battalion of tech priests engaged in the operation and maintenance of the Voca Consensio, both the vessel itself and its choir. Their secret labors across many worlds throughout the sector ensure the glory of the Omnissiah soaring to new heights, and the machine cult in his name, a new congregation. Those who work with Cantus personally witness his obsession with enlightening as many souls as possible with the art of the choir. Some believe this is how Cantus sees his path to gaining a position within the hierarchy of the Lathe worlds. There are, of course, those who whisper of far darker designs. They are convinced that he is not merely paving his way back, but seriously aiming for the position of Fabricator General. The new surge in his influence has not gone unnoticed, and those who still remember his past deeds are sure that he has the wit to unleash masses of religious fanatics against Costella and his Copper Guard. Alter Templum Calixis, Ext 3. Beyond the Drusus marches lie 2 unremarkable stars. Orbiting the larger of these, named Rubicon II, revolve several mundane planets. The system itself is absolutely indistinguishable from many thousands of others, except for one detail: its immediate proximity to one of the most significant natural phenomena of the region, the Coronis Passage, also known as the Maw. This stable passage provides a relatively safe route through mighty warp storms to the mysterious region of space known as the Coronis Expanse. It is thanks to this that the system gradually transformed from a backwater observation outpost into a vital hub of commercial and military communication. Many organizations in the sector vie for control of Port Wanda, fully aware that it is the key to controlling the Maw. Naturally, among these organizations are the Adeptus Mechanicus, though their interests lie in realms far removed from trade. While all others seek the Coronis Passage in search of new territories and sources of wealth, the Mechanicus cult is most interested in exploring the secrets of the Maw itself and the influence it exerts on the surrounding cosmos. It is with this purpose that they have erected several research stations throughout the system, the most important of which is located in orbit around Skiri, a frozen planet at the very edge of the system, dimly illuminated by red light. This station is named Alter Templum Calixis X3. Unlike other agencies in the sector, the machine cult already had footholds in the system by the time the Coronis Passage was discovered. The presence of a Magos in Port Wanda provided a base for future operations and allowed for a seamless transition of the power struggle over the port. Only a few understood that the interests of the Mechanicus were concentrated on the far reaches of Rubicon II. This became apparent only after all major political factions simultaneously renounced claims to one of the worlds of the system, entirely granting it to the adepts of the machine god. This operation required months of intense labor and an entire cohort of lathe factors. Each was assigned to a strictly defined power structure and conducted their intricate political maneuvering independently, yet in full agreement with the overarching goal. The result was not long in coming. The tech priests became the full sovereigns of Skiri, a planet at the farthest edge of Rubicon II. Although for many this event came as a surprise, only a few deemed it an achievement. This world was a mundane, ice-covered rocky orb, granted merely a brief mention in the explorer's logbook of the rogue trader Vivaldi Jontur, the discoverer of the system. Much like most objects within the system, Skiri's depths were not rich in valuable ores or any other natural resources that could be feasibly exploited. Even the orbit of this world was so remote from the port and standard intra-system routes that many hardly remembered its existence. Thus, for the most part, the authorities of Port Wanda ignored the fact that the Mechanicus were gradually covering the planet and the space around it with a network of research stations and powerful auspexes. Meanwhile, the tech priests were interested not in the world itself, but in its location. In the very early days of the exploration of the Coronis Passage, they discovered around the Maw vast accumulations of wreckage suspended in the void. Most of it slowly drifts towards the nearest gravitational well of Rubicon II. Aside from the debris of Imperial ships, fragments of Xenos artifacts, as well as those of human but clearly non-Imperial origin, can be found. It was precisely this accumulation, as well as the mysterious nature of the corridor itself, that became the primary focus of their research. The remoteness of the object of their studies also afforded them much greater freedom of action. In other words, Skiri was an ideal research base and soon became a stronghold for all their clandestine operations. The cult of the machine continued to maintain a presence in the port, which naturally was and remains the main staging base for fleets embarking on expansion. The lot of the shadow-shrouded Skiri was much more delicate operations, confined to the limits of the comet cloud of the system. The Alter Templum Calixis X3 dominates the icy plains of the planet, raising multi-kilometer antennas of piercing arrays, the combined power of which suffices to guide an entire fleet through the void if necessary. From here, the Magos watch over the corridor, vigilantly scanning for any signs of instability and fluctuations that might aid or hinder ships traversing it. Equally closely, they monitor the wreckage that the Maw occasionally spews from its unfathomable depths. dispatching, if necessary, tiny reconnaissance craft capable of retrieving any intriguing samples. However, the most meticulously guarded secret of Skiri lies in the fact that the planet itself harbours a mass of mysterious relics within its frozen depths. Ancient machines, once used for military purposes, now conduct excavations across the planet in search of these treasures. The remains of xenos and archaeotechnical artifacts they uncover are transported to enormous underground vaults, from which the majority later departs for the ports of the Lathe worlds for further study. Items deemed of little value are sent to Port Wanda, where quasi-legal factions sustain themselves through trade, while not publicizing the presence of the Mechanicus themselves. These renegades, trading only in the meager crumbs of the Moor's gifts, have gradually assimilated into the ranks of the largest players in Calixis. Their current position has even begun to threaten the hegemony of the Quintet, who control this sphere of the black market, giving an approximate idea of Skiri's true wealth. However, this is just one of many stations in the region. In the orbit of Footfall there is the Alter Templum Calixis X-17, conducting surveillance on the opposing end. Its ordinal number implies the existence of other stations, but all attempts to gather any information about them have been fruitless. There are suspicions that they are scattered across the expanse of the Rubicon 2 comet cloud, or within the mysterious intertwinings of the deep corridors of the port itself. The truth is known to few. Most of these stations were mysteriously destroyed, and the Magos are convinced that sooner or later this fate will befall X3 as well. Something else dwells in the shadowy reaches of the cloud, and whatever it may be, its hunger is not sated. The tech priests working on Skiri and some outer comets have refined and modified their augmetics and now adapted to the surrounding ices. However, these tech priests, known as cryons, have become so accustomed to extremely low temperatures that they simply cannot exist in a more human-friendly environment. Cryons move freely across Skiri, simply ignoring the incredible cold. Their systems consume almost no oxygen, so only a few carry external reserves of air, preferring instead to simply chip off a piece of frozen gases and process it into a breathing mixture using a dispenser tank. The Lathe Covenant approved the cryon augmetic pattern, and now tech priests, modified in this way, conduct research peacefully in such unusual places for humans as planets encrusted with nitrogen ice or covered with swamps of methane thick as liquid clay. On Skiri, however, they have only one object of observation, the corridor, and if something ever passes through it that can threaten the sector, they will be the first to detect this threat. These are far from all the mysterious worlds and secret outposts of the tech priests of the Calixis sector, but only those about which information has been acquired. There is no doubt that there are many more such outposts, but many remain shrouded in strict secrecy, and some have vanished under the influence of various anomalies that so densely fill this region. In any case, the Magos of the Lathe worlds meticulously control the region entrusted to them and remain loyal to Mars and Terra.